It's another episode of the Pick Six podcast. I'm Sam McKewon, along with Evan Bland, who remains at a wintry Game of Thrones-esque Memorial Stadium. Winter has come at Nebraska, so to speak, and we're still trying to figure out when fall is going to come, right? So like this year, it's going to be a reversal. It's going to be winter into fall. We're going to talk quite a bit about that on this podcast. We're going to play 10 questions today. Last time we did this was over the summer. A lot of these questions will center on what's going on with the Nebraska football team and the Big Ten and testing and various things, the lawsuit. There's a lot of heat going on in the Big Ten right now. So we're going to have 10 questions. Try to spend about 6-7 minutes on each one. We're going to talk a little NFL. We'll talk a little bit of September 11th. Today is September 11th, 2020, so we'll talk a little bit about our memories of that particular day, September 11th, 2001. I think Kevin and I have some distinct memories. We hope to get some other folks on this podcast starting maybe next week. We'll have some more chatter going on, but people are pretty busy today. We would normally be preparing for the what would it have been? Either the Central Michigan or the Illinois football games, depending on if you're looking at Iteration 1 or Iteration 2 of Nebraska's 2020 football schedule. As it stands, we're waiting still for the Big Ten to come back together and decide when there will be a return to competition date. And that may happen soon. It may not happen for another week. You just never really know. I guess we'll find out as the weekend unfolds. But I want to remind everybody of our sponsor. It's the Team Schwalbach. The Schwalbach Agency is a family-owned all-state insurance agency with 4 licensed insurance pros, saving thousands of Nebraska Husker fans money. There's homeowner, auto, life, and flood insurance across Nebraska, and they also insure all the big boy toys, motorcycles, boats, RVs, and off-road vehicles. If you've had your roof replaced in the last 5 years, give Daryl Schwalbach, Kyle Schwalbach, Nancy Mosek, or Kyle Murdoch a call at 402-590-5200. They can help you save a bundle. There's free no-obligation insurance reviews and quotes. They're going to make sure that all their fellow Nebraska fans are properly protected. Again, you can contact them at 402-590-5200 or www.nebraskaallstate.com. That's www.nebraskaallstate.com. Thank you to Team Schwalbach for continuing to be a sponsor of the Pick Six podcast. Well, Evan, we're going to start with question number 1 on this podcast, and that question goes to you. What is the latest in the Nebraska player lawsuit? Today is a significant day in that, and that the Big Ten is required to hand over documents at some point today. What kind of documents will the Big Ten be handing over? What has the Big Ten done in response to that? And what can you tell us about the Husker player lawsuit?
Right. It's as the world turns here, we're just moving forward a little bit. The news came down Thursday that the Big Ten would be filing a motion to dismiss, or that they have filed a motion to dismiss, and that the hearing for that will be on September 25th. And so the process for that is such that the Big Ten files its argument today on why this case should be thrown out. Nebraska player reps will file their argument next Friday about why this case has merit and should move forward. And then those arguments will be presented before Judge Susan Strong of the Lancaster County District Court on the 25th, at which time she'll make a ruling about whether to continue or not, whether this lawsuit has merit and can continue, or they'll throw it out, and that'll be that. But so that's going on simultaneously. We're almost to the deadline that the court gave the Big Ten to file to produce some of those documents related to its postponement of fall sports, most notably for the case being the bylaws of the Big Ten, the 13-page document that most of which was redacted when they submitted it as evidence recently. And so they're going to put that, presumably they'll be producing that. They'll be producing minutes related to the meeting, not related to who voted which way in the postponement decision, but making the Big Ten confirm as an entity that it was in fact an 11-3 vote that occurred. So that presumably could be today. It could be the date was September 12th, which is a Saturday. So there was some, I think, uncertainty about whether that meant today, whether that meant maybe Monday it could happen. So we don't know exactly when that'll happen, but that's coming out too. So kind of two things going on there in terms of the Big Ten producing some documents, and then this motion to dismiss. And I think that the big difference with that hearing, as opposed to what we've already had with the motion for expedited discovery, part of the discussion to this point has been on the merits of the case, but part of it has been on why the Big Ten should be forced to produce these documents sooner. Typically, it would be a 45-day window by Nebraska law, and they got that down to under 20. So that was part of the argument early on. Now moving forward, the arguments will be on strictly the merits of the case. So the different things that Nebraska player reps have alleged in terms of interfering with their expectation to profit from their name, image, and likeness. Whether there actually was a vote, going through the counts against the Big Ten. So it's not done yet. Obviously, the goal from the Nebraska player rep side is to get this thing moving quickly with college football really getting going this weekend, the SEC joining in a couple of weeks. So at the very least, on the same weekend that the SEC gets going, there should be a ruling about whether this case will continue or whether it doesn't have merit in the eyes of the court, and they move on without that.
The Ohio Attorney General, so the state Attorney General in Ohio, has said what?
Well, he has said that the Big Ten could absolutely be liable for the money, the financial fallout that these schools are putting out there, and that the Big Ten doesn't have the authority to force essentially this group of institutions to not play. And so that's kind of another looming thing. I don't believe that's been something that's been actually filed. That's been more of an opinion by that.
Saber rattling.
Yeah.
They're rattling the saber of the rattlesnake.
Right. So it's not out there, but that's looming too. It's honestly kind of surprising to me that there aren't more lawsuits being filed. I mean, the way that the Nebraska parents joined up with, I think it was 10 other schools in the Big Ten, maybe 11, in terms of aligning their message and throwing that out there to the Big Ten. Nebraska is still the only school that's actually filed and pursued legal action against the league. So
yeah, you got to find a lawyer willing to do it.
Yeah, and they did.
That's part of. Yeah, they did. They did. And Mike Flood. So that's probably a big piece of it. So that'll be maybe some news today. Maybe it'll be tomorrow. I don't know, but. The Big Ten will have to produce those documents, so on and so forth. That'll be notable. I look forward to seeing the resolution of this lawsuit. I'm just curious to see how it all plays out, because I think it's been downplayed in a lot of places, in part because A, it was Nebraska players that put it forward, and B, I just think there's certain people in media that don't think the Nebraska players should be doing this. I don't really have an opinion either way. I don't think I'm supposed to. I'm just curious to see what the outcome is. So I guess we'll find out if we go on. Question number 2. What the hell is going on with the Big Ten's deliberations to bring the sport back either sometime this fall or in January? I'll let you start, and then I'll have some thoughts.
Oh, man, thanks for that. Yeah, what the hell is the best way to lead into it? Because, wow. Just think about what the coaches said yesterday. Think about what Ryan Day and James Franklin said from Ohio State and Penn State. I mean, my goodness, yeah. These are two top 15 teams, the head coach of these teams coming out and blasting league leadership, calling communication unclear at best. They've gotten almost no direction. When Scott Frost spoke with Tom Chattel last weekend, he said, yeah, there's really been no communication from the league. They're in a holding pattern. So I don't know. I mean, we don't know, right? Like the leaks that have come out in various sources nationally have presumably come from coaches and athletic directors. They have not, it would appear, come from presidents and chancellors too much. Nebraska, to its credit, with Ted Carter and Ronnie Green, they've been pretty forthcoming publicly about what's going on. But, there's been the rumor for the last week or so that there would be a vote in that Council of Presidents and Chancellors. That hasn't been the case, at least not publicly. I thought it was notable that Ryan Day in his statement said that the Big Ten's medical subcommittee had done a good job preparing them for return to safe play by mid-October. So, there's got to be rumblings of that certainly going on, but when you don't put out anything publicly and evidently you don't put out anything internally in terms of communicating with your coaches or athletic directors, it leaves one to wonder what those discussions are like. Are those discussions even being had? What's Kevin Warren doing? The commissioner, we don't really know. We're just kind of left twiddling our thumbs here. This idea, most coaches have said it would take 2 to 3 weeks of practice for them to be able to play a game, which you're talking early to mid-October. But then Wisconsin, they had a 2-week shutdown that they announced yesterday with a COVID-19 outbreak. So I don't know, man. Lots of uncertainty. I think your Thanksgiving target date that we've talked about still seems like a pretty realistic option. But man, it just feels like there's not a whole lot of urgency going on at the league level, and that it's leaving teams like Nebraska and others to acquire their own rapid testing ability and to make their own way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with some of that. I think that the timeline could be moved up to some point in October. If there's a certain hybrid model, perhaps would be helpful in the sense of, hey, when you guys feel comfortable playing, maybe you guys can start in November. Give us the latitude if we want to do this in our communities to host a couple of non-conference games in October. I think that is a reasonable compromise. It allows the presidents at a couple of these universities, and we'll talk about the one at Rutgers here a little bit more in a moment, to, stand on whatever principle they want to, while also allowing Ohio State, Nebraska, maybe a few other schools to go out and seek a couple of FCS or lower FBS opponents to play at home, so they can get some football in before the Big Ten season starts. Here's my sort of intel. Some of it is pretty educated. Some of it is just my read on everything that's happened, and I've been pretty comfortable with my read for months on this particular issue. And nothing that was said yesterday, makes me feel otherwise. First, I think one of the biggest things that I would say is Ohio State remains Ohio State. They had one player obviously declare for the NFL draft today in Wyatt Davis. That will probably be the first of many. Hard to see. Maybe he can come back. It's possible, I suppose, but they're feeling like it's becoming less and less likely that the Big Ten is going to start in any sort of proximity that would allow a player like Davis to prepare for the NFL. But Ohio State remains Ohio State. They want to play for a national championship. They know that they've got to be able to start their football season at a point where they can still do that, and that's not going to be Thanksgiving. And so you're seeing Ohio State push very, very hard. And again, 25 years ago, Ohio have been that kind of program, but shifted the perspective of that program. And there's been some derision now put toward Ohio State for putting its own interest above the interests of the rest of the league. And I understand, that perspective to some degree, but from another degree, Ohio State's simply looking for the same solutions that apparently the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC have come to. And so Ohio State's pushing hard. Nebraska's pushing hard. There may be a few other states in there pushing hard. Part of the concern right now, as it relates to the Big Ten, is there is a vagueness and a lack of clarity on two things. One, the level, the nuances of the obstacles that teams have to clear to make certain presidents feel comfortable about a season coming back. It's been nebulous, right? Nebulous. It's been nebulous, right? Like there's no distinct, here are the exact things that we're concerned about. It seems to be sort of a nebulous, don't want to get your arms around it concern. Some people think that might be purposeful. that, hey, we're not going to exactly tell you because then you might meet it. You might meet those goals. And so there's a lack of clarity about exactly what the 5 specific problems are and then exactly how you resolve those. That's one. The second is there seems to be sort of a collectivized concern related to testing and related to contact tracing and related to safety, right? I think the myocarditis stuff can be addressed one way or another. I think there's ways in which that can be addressed. 1, 2. The testing piece, the Big Ten, unlike the Pac-12, has not come up with a testing plan that is consistent or conference-wide. And as a result, the one thing that seems to be a major concern to everybody hasn't been resolved. Isn't it the Big Ten's job to at least resolve or address a concern in the off chance that you might play a season? In other words, hey, we may not play a season, but damn it, if we're going to play one, we're going to be ready to play it. And I think there's a concern that there's a lack of readiness in the league and a kind of like a neglectfulness, not negligence, but a kind of like, yeah, people aren't ready. Yeah. And we don't have, testing. Ready, testing. And I think the response from other schools in the league is, well, we can get ready on the testing. Get the teams ready then. Like everybody keeps saying, well, there's some of these teams aren't even on campus. Then get them back to campus and get the testing protocol in place. And let's go. Like even if we decide not to play a season, it would be better to be prepared for it. It's kind of like having insurance, right? You have homeowners insurance, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you don't have it. I mean, you don't wait until you get hit by the fire or the big storm. Or the sump pump backs. You don't wait until then. You get it beforehand. So you establish insurance before the thing that you got the insurance for happens. And it's the exact same situation here. They have not established a plan that actually gets them back to action. And I think there's a sense of, well, look, your actions tell us your intent. Your lack of action tells us your intent. Where is the plan? Where is the clarity? Where is the action? And I think that I think you can isolate that concern away from whether you play or not play, right? Like if you isolate that concern and you just say this is an issue regardless of what the presidents decide, because sooner or later some sports teams coming back to play. If the NCAA says we're going to start basketball in November, you can bet your butt that the Big Ten is going to be playing basketball in November, because this discussion is going to shift considerably when it's 14 guys instead of 130, and that's fair. It's fair to say that it's a little bit easier to manage a 15-man roster, or in some cases 12 men. Or 12 women in women's basketball than it is 130 men. I get that. That's understandable. It's a smaller cluster. But you better have these plans in place for that point. You can't just say, well, I guess we'll figure this out on November 23rd. 4 days before the basketball season. So I think there's a frustration, the lack of preparedness. And the lack of preparedness and the lack of preparedness. Can you still hear me?
Yeah. Still got you, kind of.
Okay.
There you go.
So that's where I think the consternation is coming from. Is the frustration as it relates to, do you guys really want to do this? Like, are you really considering this? Is you really doing this? And then you have comments like yesterday from the Rutgers president, and let's go over these a little bit.
Yeah.
The president's name, he is new. His name's Jonathan Holloway. He's the Rutgers president. Previously, he was the provost at Northwestern University, so he's very familiar with the Big Ten. First of all, the top half of this story in NewJersey.com, which used to be the New York Star Ledger, is related to Donald Trump, and I don't know why. I think that's reflective of the media out there. This story isn't real. The Big Ten's decision-making process and coming back to football isn't really about Trump, but whatever. But there's some better quotes later in the story that I think are valuable. One of them from Holloway is this: if I'm wrong because I was erring on the side of safety, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think I'm wrong, though. I just don't think it. And if I had to put money down, we're going to see radical changes within a month, no later than October. I'm really worried about what we're heading toward on just college campuses in general, not just sports. It's deeply concerning. Fair enough. Okay. Now, incidentally, you can have sports without having students on college campuses. It would be safer, but somewhere along the way, somebody thought that was a bad idea because, heaven forbid, the athletes stay on campus and play the sport that they love and not sit at home with the rest of the student body. But okay, fair enough. Here's the more salient quote. It's at the end. Holloway said that the coronavirus has pulled back the curtain on how certain conferences, with their decision to play on despite the nationwide crisis, have put a warped value on athletics compared to others who have hit the pause button. By the way, Holloway is a former college football player. I'm going to come at this a different way. The virus has revealed things that many of us have known to be true for a long time, but now we can't hide from that fact. And when it comes to what is the value proposition of college football across the country, the virus has revealed the truth here about the different conferences are navigating that space. And I'm very happy to be in the Big Ten. What do you think of that quote, Evan?
Man, oh man.
What do you think he's saying there, and what do you think about that quote?
Well, I think that quote is kind of the overarching notion behind the 11 votes that were in favor of postponing fall sports.
Yahtzee.
I mean, we've been absolutely kind of muddling through why and how. I mean, this is it right there. And I think, he's alluding to this idea that other conferences are valuing football and athletics more than academics and safety. I think it's been, as he kind of alludes to, it's common knowledge that the SEC, it just means more, right? The Big 12, athletics before academics, but not here, right? The truth about how different conferences are navigating that space. So he's saying the other conferences, that's the priority. Sports, how do we get that back? How can we force it back if necessary? Whereas in the Big Ten, hey, I'm very happy to be here. We're very happy that academics and a higher level of intelligence trumps out, wins out over trying to force sports and however important they may or may not be. So I think absolutely this is kind of that quote that should be the headline for those 11 schools that voted the way that they did. And it's not any one specific, medical study. It's this larger point that I think is an attitude that says maybe we're better because we value academics and safety over trying to force this thing as they perceive it.
Question 3 is, and this to me is a more important question than whether you think Jonathan Holloway is right morally. Question 3 of our 10 questions is Jonathan Holloway right about the league? Is that actually the Big Ten's value set? Or is that the value set of a handful of people at the very top who many of whom are new to these roles, who may not understand how the sands in the league have shifted over the last 10 to 15 years?
Yeah, it's a good thought. I mean, what do we know? We know that his sentiments are not shared by any of the athletic directors. We know they're not shared by most, if not all, of the football coaches, probably most. And so when we say, is this the Big Ten stance, we have to recognize again that these decisions are coming from presidents and chancellors who are more focused on academics than they are athletics. And they're the ones putting out these votes, making this decision. Kevin Warren, the commissioner, has made his viewpoint very clear about erring on the side of player safety, to a fault, essentially. So no, I don't think if you were to poll all the leadership, including the ADs, the coaches, that this would be the consensus. But when you talk about the way that the league makes decisions, the protocols that it goes through to vote on something, and that ultimately comes down to people who are not in athletics every day. It's the notion of a small group, but I would not say it's the same for the league at large. How about you?
Well, I think that can you still hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Am I still there?
Yeah, a little slow, but you're still
All
there.
right. There's something. Okay. If Jim Delaney did one thing while he was the Big Ten commissioner, if Jim Delaney did one thing while he was the Big Ten commissioner, it was this. He created a league that made so much money that the athletic departments could not help but put the money back into the infrastructure, the coaching, and the recruiting of athletes. And in doing that, he has made the league much more of an athletic juggernaut than it was even 15 or 10 years ago. When you do that, you put more people into the systems of these schools that understand the value of what a Thursday night or a Wednesday night inside the Breslin Student Events Center, or a Saturday afternoon at Memorial Stadium, or if you want to talk baseball, a Saturday afternoon in Haymarket Park, or in Michigan's cool little stadium, whatever you want to call it. The investment that has been put into sports and the competitive gains that have been made in the Big Ten are significant enough that you're now the league is at a different place than it was 25 years ago. It has survived significant scandals. I mean, the thing with Jerry Sandusky at Penn State was a big deal. The thing at Michigan State was just as bad, although it didn't exactly involve the football or basketball programs. I'm talking about Larry Nassar. That was hideous.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not bringing those things up, but you have to understand levels of competitiveness now in the Big Ten that has just changed the way that the league looks at things. An outlier to that is Rutgers, or at least it is in the time that Greg Schiano was gone. Now he's back. I'm sure he's not thrilled to read what his president said, but Rutgers has long been an outlier. It's why Rutgers isn't any good in sports, is because Rutgers has always had what you might want to call an ambivalent relationship to athletics. They're not very good, and that's the reason why, is because their leadership and their faculty have always had an ambivalent relationship, and it's okay to have an ambivalent relationship, but it's reflected in their actual performance. And I think Schiano changed that to some degree, and he brought Rutgers football up to a profile where it was gettable in the Big Ten, but it's back down to a crappy profile, and it's going to be challenging for that school to understand the level of what do you want to call it, competitive commitment that it takes to be in the Big Ten. That's something they're maybe starting to learn in basketball, but they still don't probably understand in football or other sports. And so I respect Holloway's perspective, and he can have whatever moral position he wants. And maybe he will be right. Maybe it will fall apart in September, and by October, we'll be looking at a shutdown sports system in college. It's possible. But I'm not sure he's right about his league. I think he's right about the presidents in the league and the decision they made, but I don't know that he's right about his league at large. And I think part of what has happened is you have a separation in a handful of people at the very top who I think perceive the Big Ten to be one thing and hired Kevin Warren to bolster that, versus when it comes down to brass tacks, who's going to care about athletics and who isn't. Oh, by the way, it's not going to be the Big Ten. If the Big Ten continues on that course, coaches are going to leave. They're going to look, okay, well, hey, you know what? Obviously, you guys didn't care as much as we thought. And I understand what this president is saying, but it's kind of an inflection point. It's a big inflection point. looking at the future of the league. If this is how if president can say that and say, I'm very happy to be in the Big Ten because we didn't value college football as much as the Big 12 and the ACC, which are as good of leagues in college football, and it could be possible that what you're seeing is, Big Ten academics trying to take back the league, and having hired Kevin Warren to help them do that. I don't know. And then they're gonna have to face the fact, though, that there are boosters and coaches and athletic directors are like, yeah, we didn't want it to become that. We were pretty happy with what it was becoming, and this decision lays bare the fact that there are a handful of people in leadership who may have resented the value that was being put on the sport. Mm-hmm. Now, there's supposed to be another story in the New York Star Ledger about this. I'll be honest with you. My confidence level that those questions will be posed and that Holloway's position will be challenged in that way, I'm doubtful. I think the people who at Nebraska questions that are designed to test their perspective and their worldview. And so you have to do that. And I'll be curious to see if those questions were asked, because it's pretty clear the person who wrote the story clearly agrees with the story. And so clearly agrees with Holloway, and that's okay. I'm glad the quotes are out there, and I'm glad that the thoughts are out there. And that's fine. So that's question 3. Is Jonathan Holloway right about the league? I don't know that he's right yet. We're going to find out. Question 4. When do you think the Big Ten will actually make a vote? When will the Big Ten vote?
And about what? About when they return? About protocols? All that?
Yeah, they'll vote on when they return. Yes, I believe that's true.
Based on what Nebraska leadership said in the last few days, I'll throw out Monday or Tuesday. I think maybe early next week you put something out there. That's what they said. I think it matters that it will come after the first weekend of Power 5 football being played in earnest. Kind of see how that went. What the the landscape looks like after that. It feels like the last month has been speculation on so many fronts regarding the Big Ten. But give me a Tuesday in the pool for when we get that.
Tuesday in the pool. Tuesday. All right. That's possible too.
What do you think?
I think it's possible. Yeah. I think that's entirely possible. Sure. I think I think it's going to take – I think the next vote they're going to have is going to be to say that football is going to come back on a quicker time frame than they'd like. And I think any news that is designed to push against that is, going to push back the timeline. So, for example, there's a story out about 4 of 26 Ohio State athletes getting positive PCR tests showing signs of myocarditis on a cardiac MRI. That story's out this morning. That's probably, again, you have to put everything in categories. That's going to go in the category of, can't play. Now, the problem with the cardiac MRI statement, it's a problem. It's not a problem. So cardiac MRIs aren't usually used to detect myocarditis. Usually it's EKGs or it's other tests. It's not a cardiac MRI, which takes an hour and takes expertise to read. The reason that matters is we don't know, because people didn't take cardiac MRIs after the H1N1 or after a kid got influenza. We don't know what a cardiac MRI would have shown.
Yeah, there's no baseline.
There's no baseline. Now, people hearing that may think, well, you're just saying that, obviously there's a bigger issue. No, it's not obvious. Not when a cardiac MRI is used. It's not obvious because a differing measuring tool was used prior to now. And if a cardiac MRI is being used, and we know that it's way more sensitive and it takes an hour to look at it, and it takes real expertise to do it, and it's not always easy or definitive to see. No, actually, it is not as simple as people make it out to be. It's not. It doesn't take a medical degree to understand logic. And the logic says if there are two tests, one is more sensitive than another, and the sensitive test is only being used on one type of issue, and it wasn't used on the other type of issue, we don't know what the baseline is. It's the same issue when they test football players' brains after they have passed away, and they say this percentage have shown X, Y, and Z. Well, those brains were donated. They're a targeted group of people. You'd have to have a broad survey of people, including people who never played football, to understand the degree that, what's it called? HCE? I can't remember. HPE, something.
CTE?
CTE, yes, sorry. So that the degree that CTE shows up in any brain, and then compare that to a stamp, so on and so forth. Like it's so much more complex than just saying this is this. And science reporting over many, many years has been so poorly done because A, correlation is taken as causation. B, we don't understand the sample size. C, there isn't always baselines. And so this is going to be another moment where that information is going to be out there. People are going to say that it's proof that they shouldn't play. The Big Ten is a flashpoint. So, like, for example, the ACC and the Big 12 and the SEC have already decided to play. They've said, screw it, we're playing. And so they haven't received nearly as much criticism as Nebraska and Ohio State have, and Nebraska and Ohio State are not playing because everybody has identified the Big Ten as a flashpoint, a swing state, a political issue that people can weigh in on. They already view the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC as a lost cause. So when will they vote? I think when they actually have some sort of consensus on an accelerated timeline to play, which could be Monday, it could be 2 weeks from now. It's hard to say because there's going to be some presidents that are like, this tells me this, and that's what that means, and I vote no. The end. And then you're going to have to wait a month. And if they play all these games and nobody's sick and nobody's hospitalized and nobody is developed heart issues or whatever you want to call it, then they'll come back. They'll have to decide. Like, I just don't think they want to have a vote that says anything but an accelerated timeline. So however long it takes to get that vote, they will get that vote. Question 5. What will be the new play date? What do you think it'll be?
I think it'll be early November at this point. I think, there's been the Thanksgiving talk, as we know, there's been October 10th, which seems more and more unlikely. I guess the way that it's going, it feels like the Big Ten could wait a few weeks here, see what, your Power 5 teams, how that success or failure goes in the next few weeks. You got to get through Wisconsin and its 2-week shutdown, so you can't really start things up before that. I think we've seen enough evidence to know that the Big Ten is not going to do it until everybody's ready to get rolling. And it feels like a few weeks would be enough time at this point for them to have an educated decision on, yes, this is possible, no, it's not possible. Based on what's going on, I don't think you can. Thanksgiving just seems, the more it's going, it feels like more of a tweener to me, where it's like it's still not early enough to be part of the college football playoff, but it's you've got this weird overlap then with the last half of everybody else. So I guess I feel like early November, there's got to be a little bit of a sense of urgency. Nebraska, with what it did, as you reported, with its ability now to rapid test for COVID for both itself and an opponent, I think is notable. And so that'd be my thought right now. With how things stand, as fluid as it's been, late October, early November, it seems more likely than it has in a few weeks.
It's It's a great question. I asked it. I guess.
Great question by me.
Yes, I'm an idiot, man. Yeah, what a question by me. Oh, I'm such a moron. Okay, so I go back and forth. I think there's a way forward with testing. This is where I'll bring up the Nebraska stuff. So yesterday, Nebraska kind of was talking about antigen testing and being able to procure those. By the way, Nebraska's procuring their own testing solution. The Big Ten hasn't done that for them. There's a massive federal stockpile that I think the president has offered some of that to the Big Ten. Abbott is the federal stockpile. Abbott does not require a machine. They use a card. But Nebraska has secured the Quidel machine to run the tests. The reason they can't get the Abbott tests is because Abbott is fulfilling the federal stockpile order, which is $150 million. So Abbott's not going to get to personal orders until they fulfill that order. Abbott's probably the fastest and easiest test, but the federal government bought them, which was, I suppose, wise on the federal government's part. So the federal government gets to dole those out. Nebraska went and bought its machine from Quidel and then bought 1,200 tests. So there's probably other schools that are now going with those initiatives and trying to figure that stuff out with antigen testing. They probably have their own machines. So Nebraska believes that 2 tests a week, PCR is one of those tests, and then an antigen test is the appropriate solution or a rational solution. In some locales, it won't be enough because the public health department won't be satisfied with that result. And so you're going to see more tests. If you can get the Abbott test, if the Big Ten could procure part of the federal stockpile, the procurement's pretty cheap. Those tests aren't very expensive. You could dole those tests out to the schools that needed them, that needed to test more often because of the political environment in their place or their university leadership. They could test 4 or 5 times a week, and you could get this thing back pretty quick. Because if you're testing somebody every day, all the time, and you got that procurement through the federal government. So if anybody wants to criticize the federal government and wants to criticize Trump about how he doles out that procurement, they can do that. But but the Big Ten should not limit its own ability to get the testing allotment because they're worried about someone criticizing the fact that the Big Ten did. Because I put my story out yesterday, and there were a couple of comments from people I respect and think a lot of, who were like, so the Nebraska can get these for themselves, but the student, I'm like, hey. You got to understand that this is, Quidel would sell the machines to whoever is going to buy them, but Nebraska Athletics bought them. Now, if the Big Ten gets the federal stockpile, they get it. Like that's up to the federal government. So if you want to criticize the federal government, I suppose you can, but you can't. The Big Ten probably shouldn't be, restricting itself from getting the stockpile. Anyway, if you had the options to test 3, 4, 5 times a week with antigen testing, then I think you have the ability to get back relatively quickly. Because you can say, look, we're testing these guys every single day. We're trying to do the very best we can to make sure they don't have it, isolating them, et cetera, et cetera. And we don't, you know what I mean? If you turn athletes out and say, listen, we're not going to be working out. We're only going to be doing the 12 hours a week. Just go live your life. We're not going to be playing football this fall. That doesn't mean that the virus is going to skip over them because the Big Ten made a moral choice, right? Right? Of
course, yeah.
So there's not like a, you know what I mean? Like the virus isn't moral. So playing football in and of itself is not dangerous if the night before you test, no one has it. Like if they don't have it the night before they test, you give everyone an antigen test and they all test negative, then going out and colliding with one another in pads is not an additional danger. Now, fans is a different issue maybe. And I'm not sure about this deal with 25,000 fans at LSU or Ole Miss or whatever.
Yeah.
But the playing of the game in and of itself, if you have 100 dudes on one sideline and 100 dudes on the other sideline, and none of them have the virus, them going out and playing a game of football isn't going to give one of them the virus, because the virus, comes down from the sky and infects one of them. So if you can test daily, then you could remove the threat of transmitting the virus in competition. So I think that would get the Big Ten back a little bit faster. So I vacillate between, could this thing be mid-October? Could it be October 24th? Could it be October 17th? Could you have a flex situation where you say, look, we'll go down to 8 games, and we'll have 8 conference games starting this time in November, but we're going to let teams have the flexibility to schedule a couple of their own if they want. To me, that's an option. Like, if Rutgers wants to say, hey, we're not coming back until we get antigen testing every single day, and we're not going to go play at Nebraska, no way, no how, but we're not going to play these teams unless they have daily antigen testing, Nebraska could say, fine, you want us to test it? Whatever. We'll do it just to play our games. But what you do is you say, hey, here's going to be the standard when the conference games start. But if y'all want to go out and play 1 or 2 games prior to that, and you want to schedule your own games and play those games, and you feel comfortable with the risks on that, go ahead. I think that hybrid model makes sense, personally. Doesn't it?
Does it make sense? Yeah, sure. Is it realistic that the Big Ten would go for that? Man, it sure doesn't seem like it, right?
If you had daily testing, maybe. I think, like, for example, if every Big Ten school had the availability of daily testing, then what are you concerned about? Fans. But you can control that. You can say, hey, look, no fans or whatever, 4,000 fans, whatever. But if you're concerned about kids getting the virus, they're not less likely to get the virus outside of the sport. They're more likely, one, it seems like, or anyway. And 2, if again, like I said, if everybody tests negative and they test negative every day, I mean, it's a completely safe environment. Nobody out there has the virus. I mean, you test the people the night before, all the guys, they come back negative. Whoever comes back positive stays back. You contact trace that person. Let's say it knocks out 5 guys. The other 95 guys go out there, they play. No one has the virus. Mm-hmm. To me, it seems pretty safe.
Isn't it, even this kind of discussion, I feel like, is kind of a look into what the frustration must be like for coaches and athletic directors in the Big Ten, because, like you're talking about, you can lay all this out and say how it's going to be safe, but it still feels like, man, to some extent, these presidents and chancellors have their minds made up, or you don't know what their standards exactly are, and so it creates this atmosphere of that just kind of pushes down ingenuity. It kind of pushes down creative ideas, right? Because how many times have different proposals been put out there only to kind of be met with silence by the Big Ten at the leadership level? It's interesting, because I think you can lay out all the reasoning that you have, and I still feel like the Big Ten, I don't have a lot of confidence that they'd still go for that. And what's more, I don't know that there'd be a lot of confidence that they would explain why they wouldn't go for that. So I think that's just a really good example of kind of the frustration that people have internally as they're trying to get this thing going again.
Yeah. Yep. We'll see what happens. I think it could be October. I think I don't know that you're going to have everybody, that wants to play in October. I think it'd have to be maybe a hybrid thing. And then daily testing is crucial. Mm-hmm. If you get that, man, it's hard to argue against it, other than to say we don't think we should do it because we think it's wrong to have daily testing in football or something like that. Anyway, so that was question 5. Question 6 is this. Do you feel like college football is going to make it through a month?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think how many games have been postponed already? 5, 6, something like that. 9. Okay.
7, 8, 9. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of those have been, I don't know how notable it is that most of them have been non-conference games, but yeah, I mean, I feel like it'll make it through a month. I don't have a lot of great reasons for why, because so many of the protocols are different from team to team and conference to conference. But, there's some flexibility still in the schedules, the way that teams have laid things out. These are players that are still, and coaches and programs that are still motivated by safety protocols, right? Like, so in the Big Ten, some of the outbreaks that we've seen, like at Wisconsin, for example, you could point to this idea that, hey, they're not being tested consistently with an in-season protocol, whereas a lot of these other schools still are. There's the carrot dangling out there for a football season. And so I think that will, quell some behavior from student athletes in terms of getting out to parties and things that college students would do otherwise. So yeah, I feel like they will. Certainly most of the programs, most of your top programs will, I feel like, for a month at least. I don't know. So some of your lower level schools that are still playing, lower level FBS schools, you wonder if they have enough resources consistently to make sure that everybody's healthy and everybody's accounted for on game day. But yeah, I think they'll make it through a month at least. And, I guess if I were to bet, I think most of them will make it through the season in some fashion or another, obviously with postponements and things like that along the way. But there's just too much on the line, I think, to just give up and not let it happen. I feel like too many people are invested in this thing. And so, yeah, I'll say, yeah, I think that it'll make a month.
Well, we'll see. I guess we'll see how it goes. I think it might take. I think it might be a month. I think it might not be. I guess we're just going to have to. I suspect that they're going to make it through. I really do.
Okay.
Yeah. I suspect they're going to make it through. I think the SEC will get to its season. A month is October 11th. So do I think, it kind of depends on, because cases sort of rise, and then you got to find out if you've bubbled your team enough to kind of get through that, and then the cases kind of spike and then they go down. If by the end of September, early October, cases have gone down on all these campuses, which I think they might, then we might be in a very clear sailing kind of environment. On the flip side of the coin, if the coronavirus is more spreadable as the weather gets a little chillier because the droplets are heavy, all that other stuff, then I guess we'll find out. We'll see. We'll see how the coronavirus acts. Pretty soon, too, you're going to get into a situation where somebody gets the flu, the regular old influenza, and that runs through a team, and people don't know if it's COVID or if it's flu. And we're going to start running into this stuff very, very soon, where people are going to get, they're going to have the flu. They're going to go get tested. They're going to say they tested positive for influenza, but not COVID. And people are going to be like, I have COVID. That's what I have. I don't care what anybody says. How will universities navigate? You tested for influenza, but not COVID. Well, yeah, okay. Well, we still got to keep all these players out because they might have COVID, that kind of stuff. So as time goes on here in the fall, that's going to be a trickier thing to navigate as well. That's question 6. So we've moved through the football dynamics. Question 7. Today is September 11th, 2020. What were you doing on September 11th, 2001? Evan?
Yeah, I was a sophomore at Lincoln Southeast High School. I heard about the initial plane crash into the World Trade Center between, I think, second and third period. I was at my locker, and a friend next to me said, "Hey, did you hear about what happened with the plane?" I said, "No, that's odd. That's crazy." And my next class happened to be world history, and so we, as a class, sat there for an hour and watched the coverage. We saw the second plane hit the tower, and I mean, it was just shocking. The first one had hit, and cameras were on it, and to see the second one go in, I mean, it just changed the tenor of the conversation from what happened to, oh wow, we're under attack. I mean, this is some kind of a coordinated effort. And the rest of the day, school stayed in session, and it was just kind of a blur the rest of the day walking around. I vividly remember the only class that didn't allow us to watch the coverage was my Spanish class, because the teacher said, that just wanted to continue on. Like, she just felt like there were lessons to be done. But every other class, we watched that thing, went home, watched coverage all night. Again, so I was 15, so I, wasn't an adult by any means, but just kind of processing what had happened, with seeing how adults acted at the time, people, my parents, teachers, everybody else. You knew that it was something that was serious, something that was going to change the country, change a lot about how we live our lives, and it has. So from that day, I remember that. And just to put a couple of different kind of sports spins on it, I still think two of the moments in sports that continue to give me chills whenever I go back and watch videos. One was President Bush throwing out the first pitch in New York City for the Yankees Diamondbacks, and him throwing a strike and the roar of the crowd. I get chills just thinking back on that now. What a cool symbolic moment that was. And then Nebraska, and it's coming out. It's Tunnel Walk coming out, and it's usually the players and the coaches and the flags, and that day coming out with the American flag with, I think, was it Marines or soldiers? I don't remember exactly. Firefighters, maybe.
Firefighters, yeah.
Firefighters, who it was, yeah. And them coming out, law enforcement and firefighters. That was just unbelievable, the way that they adjusted the Husker vision for that, the way that they built that up. It was such an emotional lead into that game. So those are some of my memories of that time, and just how crazy and emotional it was.
So I worked for a website, State Paper, and the person I was living with at the time woke me up at, I don't know, whatever time it was in the morning, and said that a plane had just crashed into the World Trade Center. I went out to the living room where the TV was, and we watched the second plane crash into the World Trade Center. We were watching the Today Show. So that was we were watching NBC. And not long after that, so I worked for this website in Nebraska called State Paper, and not long after that, I got a phone call. We're going to have to do something today. You're going to have to cover something. You're going to have to write about this. Didn't exactly know what I was supposed to write about right at that moment, but we figured it out as the day went on. I went down to campus to talk to people down there about what was going on. And I was at the Union when the towers fell, which I think was about 10:30, 10:45, 11 a.m. Central Time. And there was about 500 people in the Nebraska Union, where there used to be a TV in that one area, just beyond the computer lab, sort of where the Starbucks is now. There were a bunch of people watching TV in there, and Washington fell there. And the reaction of college students was a little muted. And that's no knock on them. I think they were in shock. And, when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, your emotional response to things isn't necessarily quite as like, oh my God, like it after about 3 minutes, you started hearing that. Like, people saw it, and I don't think people could quite believe it was happening. So that was part of that particular day. And I remember talking to a few students on campus and getting the reaction, including students who were from Saudi Arabia, from the Middle East, getting their reactions on it, obviously looking at the situation through a very different lens. And they had very thoughtful thoughts about it too. So I remember doing that. I think I remember going to a blood donation center either that day or the next day, and like seeing there people coming in, and people were already coming in to donate blood, which was pretty amazing. They played some sort of thing on the radio, some sort of tribute thing all day. Like later in the evening, they were playing like all the reports over on the radio. And I remember the gas prices going up right away. Yeah. Like immediately. But it was a day when I did a lot of work. And so I didn't necessarily have a lot of time to emotionally process what was going on until later that day in the evening, and then the week that came after. The first college football game back was Nebraska against Rice. It was on a Thursday night. I was standing on the sidelines for the game. So I was standing there waiting for the game to start. We all kind of knew it was going to be an important moment because, football was coming back. But the national anthem, the tunnel walk really hit you. And then there was a national anthem. And it just really hit you. And it was we didn't know. And it was sudden, and then when everybody saw the cops and the firefighters coming out, well, everybody just broke down. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye on the sideline. It was a deeply powerful moment. Like it felt, that was probably the moment where it probably hit me the hardest. What had happened. And I think they were police officers and firefighters who had come back from helping at 9/11 because the day after, so like the day after, maybe even that night on September 11th, they were sending folks because it was bad. And they sent folks from here and they sent folks from everywhere. And a couple of those people were walking in the procession. So it was a very powerful moment. I remember it very vividly. It's a hard thing to explain to your kids. My daughter's 12 now, so I think she finally, because to explain it, you do have to explain some of the political ramifications around it. Like it's easier to explain World War II, in other words. Like, what happened on September 11th? Well, this is what happened. Well, why did it happen? Well, this is why it happened. Who are these people? Like, who did this? Who are the pilots? That ran it? Well, it was this group, and so and that takes time. It's not quite as it's easier to explain like World War I or World War II. Actually, it's not easy to explain World War One. I've tried, and I'm like, yeah, that was sort of a complex war. World War II is a little bit easier. I didn't live through it. If you live through it, you kind of know it so intrinsically. So my wife was in college. She's a little younger than me. And her memories of it are actually more poignant than mine. She, I think there's that memory of seeing it on TV and kind of just marinating in it for hours on end. And I didn't really have that. I didn't experience that. So that was question 7. Question 8. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. We're going to predict. So we're going to talk a little NFL football now. First thing we're going to do is we're going to predict your division, the AFC. Did you watch the Chiefs last night?
Oh, a little bit. As a Bronco fan, I can't stomach watching them do too well. I mean, I kind of knew how that thing was going to go. They looked good. They looked good. That's all I needed to see.
They did. Patrick Mahomes looked really good, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire, oh my God.
And that was
just when you thought that you couldn't get better. They're better.
Yeah. That was viewed as a steal on draft night too, and through week 1, man, that's looking to be the case. Yeah,
he looked like the second coming of Priest Holmes. And I don't know if he's as good as Priest Holmes, but he looked good. He looked like a star. He
did. I mean, yeah, the West and the NFL for that matter, it's got to be the Chiefs to lose. Especially this year with no preseason games, limited camps and off-season work. Like, you know what you have in that team. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes are the new Belichick and Brady. I think it's pretty clear that they have an understanding of what's going on. Much of their offense is back. So just by virtue of continuity in a weird offseason, that's something. And then with the addition that you mentioned, and just the fact that the NFC West in general isn't that good of a division, the Chiefs are a pretty easy pick there. I think Vegas has Denver as like 7.5 wins is kind of the over-under. And that's pretty much the same with everybody else too. The Chargers, the Raiders, they're moving into their new home. I still think Denver can
both teams are moving into new homes.
Yeah, right. That's true. Yep. I still feel like Denver can be that second best team. I love what they did retooling the offense in the offseason. I don't know necessarily if Drew Lock is the guy, but Noah Fant's probably going to take a jump in year 2. Philip Lindsay was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. He'll be back with they added Melvin Gordon. Cortland
Love the receiver they got. Love him.
Judy? Oh, yeah.
My favorite receiver in last year's draft.
Oh, I was thrilled with that selection for them. So, again, they didn't have a lot of opportunity to work with those guys a ton in the offseason. They have their 5th offensive coordinator in 5 years. So there's going to be a learning curve there. But, I think it should be a good battle in that division. I think somebody else is going to make the playoffs, whether that's Chargers, Broncos, or the Raiders. Don't know who that's going to be. But, again, I just feel like as we make these picks and look at this season, continuity has to carry some extra weight this year, just, again, because Zoom meetings and, film study can't really replace on-field work and working out the kinks with other people, especially on the lines and talking about working in tandem with other people. So, give me the Chiefs. That's where the easy money is betting on them to win the division and probably another Super Bowl. And after that, looks like a toss-up, at least in that division.
So here's what we're going to do. You ready? AFC East, who wins it?
Got to say New England until it isn't, right? I get the change there with no Tom Brady, but I still think New England finds a way. You?
Buffalo. Buffalo.
Yeah?
AFC North, who wins it?
Baltimore. Lamar Jackson takes another step. That defense is good. Baltimore.
AFC South.
Well, as underwhelming as the Texans looked last night against a really good team, I still think Deshaun Watson is the real deal. They added some depth at wide receiver. Texans.
Titans. Do we both have the Chiefs for the AFC West?
Yep, Chiefs.
All right, now to the NFC. NFC East.
Give me the Cowboys. I feel like they I know. I'm not a Cowboys fan by any means, but I think they're the team in that division with Dak. And I'm just not overly impressed by the rest of the division. Washington, New York, they're rebuilding. Philadelphia will be okay, but I just feel like Dallas has more of the pieces to win now.
Eagles.
Okay.
NFC North.
I don't like to say it either, but Green Bay. They felt like they were a team that was kind of learning things last year. They still went 13-3. Aaron Rodgers is still the quarterback there, so I think Green Bay pulls it out.
I hate Green Bay. I hate him. I respect Aaron Rodgers. I do. I think he's maybe the best quarterback ever, but I don't like Green Bay.
Going with
Green Bay.
Oh
no.
Calling your shot there.
No, it's not gonna be the Bears this year, Evan. It's not gonna be Chicago. I think their best hope is to sneak into a wild card. That's not my hope for them. My hope for them is that they, go 14-2 and play for the Super Bowl. They have the defense to do it, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to be 8-8, 9-7, somewhere in there. Maybe 7-9, maybe a little worse. I think they'll be better than they were last year. NFC South. Tom Brady is joined the NFC South, maybe the strongest division of all of the divisions in the NFC or the AFC.
As intriguing as Tampa Bay is with Tom Brady and with all the Husker connections, I don't see that necessarily going well or great, at least. So give me the Saints and Drew Brees and their stockpiled group of talent.
Yeah, I thought New Orleans was going to win the Super Bowl last year, and they played a stinker against the Vikings in the playoffs. They stunk in that game, and Minnesota outplayed them and deserved to win. I was really surprised at how poorly the Saints played that night, or that day, or whatever you want to call it. That said, I think it's a really strong division, and I am going to go way off the map and pick the Panthers. I think their new coach. I like what Teddy Bridgewater brings to the table. He's not gonna beat you. He's pretty accurate. They've got the best running back in the NFL, and I think they're gonna have a pretty good defense. I think the Panthers are gonna pull it out. I think it's gonna be a 10-6 kind of deal too. Those teams are gonna beat each other up so much that I don't think you're gonna have a 14-2 team emerge from it. I think if there's any team in the NFL, the NFC, that can emerge as like a 14-team winner, I think it's going to be like Green Bay, because I think they could maybe dominate their division. Maybe Dallas. But I think the AFC South, you're going to have 10-6, 10-6, 8-8, 6-10. Like nobody sucks. And
Right.
so I think that's going to be a tough week. NFC West, which is where the 49ers came out of last year.
Right. I see the 49ers as kind of as the latest of that Super Bowl runner-up group that kind of takes a step back personally. I think Seattle, Russell Wilson, you could see where that was going. And last year they retooled some of their defense in the offseason. I think Seattle's going to get it done. But I think that's a fun division. I think Arizona's offense could be sneaky good. The Rams, not so far removed from a Super Bowl, but it's going to be a fun division. But give me Seattle.
I'll take Frisco. I think it's going to be a great division. I don't know how you can, I think the Rams still have a lot of pieces, but I think maybe San Francisco's surpassed them a little bit. And then Seattle, Seattle's a little dysfunctional every year. Like, they're pretty good, but they always got drama. This year was with Jadeveon Clowney. I don't know, but they're tough to beat at home. So, but how many fans are they going to have at home? I don't even know I don't think there are any fans. So it'll be a different environment for Seattle at home. They're so dominant there. I think they won't have the home field advantage anymore because of the crowd. So I'll take Frisco. That was question number 9. Now, who do you think is going to represent the AFC and the NFC in the Super Bowl?
Well, the Chiefs, I think, on the AFC side. Baltimore could make it interesting. Houston maybe could figure some things out, but Kansas City on that side. And I guess I would say I think New Orleans will find a way on the NFC. There are a lot of really interesting teams that could come out of the NFC side, but we talk about their division. I think they'll come out battle tested. They're just they have the pieces to do it. You don't really know what the home field advantage could potentially look like, as you mentioned, but they've done it before. I'll take New Orleans and then the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take the Chiefs to repeat as Super Bowl champions. I think they're the best team. I think Tennessee is probably the second best team, but they're on the wrong side. And so I don't think it's hard for me to determine this. Part of me wants to say I agree with you about the Saints. Part of me wants to say it's going to be Frisco. But I'm not going to go off the map. I think I'm going to go with the Packers. I know they didn't add another piece offensively, but I feel like they've got enough. And on top of that, I think, again, the division they're in is pretty gettable. And so I think they can kind of get through maybe 11, 12 wins. I think the NFC is so competitive that you really can put a bunch of teams in a bag and pick one out and not really go wrong. So maybe Frisco, maybe the Packers, maybe Seattle if they can get it going. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Green Bay. Could be Dallas. Don't think it's going to be. I just don't. I know they've got good pieces. I know their offense is fun. They got Amari Cooper. They got CeeDee Lamb now, Ezekiel Elliott. I just don't know. They should be a fun team to watch, though. I'm looking forward to watching them. Do you have a second team you root for other than the Broncos? I do. It's the Browns. It's my wife's team. But do you have a second team?
I wouldn't say there's another team I root for. I've always liked watching the Steelers play. I feel like they've had a fun brand of football under Big Ben. Big playmakers. I used to be more into fantasy before it kind of drove me crazy just with the inexact nature of it. I mean, I still play, but had a lot of fun watching Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, and those guys do their thing. So for no real reason other than they kind of play a fun brand of offense, and they have one of the cooler uniforms in the NFL too. So, generally like to see them do well, but no huge interest beyond Denver.
Oh, gosh. Well, hey, you've had some Super Bowls with the Broncos. I've had one, 1985, and the Browns have never been there. They've never played for one, and they're not going to play for one this year either. All right, question 10. You ready for some picks?
Oh, yeah, sure. College football this week. Right. Almost forgot.
Well, we're going to do a little NFL, too, for the first couple weeks because the college football season doesn't really begin until September 26th. So it's pretty slim pickings for college football this week, but we'll get a couple of those, and then we're going to do a little NFL, and then we'll wean off the NFL by September 26th. Fair enough?
Let's do it.
All right. Syracuse, North Carolina.
North Carolina.
North Carolina for me. Duke, Notre Dame. I took Notre Dame.
Yeah, same.
Georgia Tech, Florida State. I'm taking Florida State.
As am I.
Western Kentucky, Louisville. I'm taking Louisville.
Same. This is scintillating.
That's okay. Arkansas State, Kansas State. I'm taking Arkansas State.
Yeah. I thought about going that way. I'll go Kansas State. It'll be a good game. That's the big noon game on Fox, right?
Packers, Vikings.
Packers.
Packers, Vikings.
Packers.
Packers. Bears, Lions.
Give me the Lions.
I'll take the Bears. Titans, Broncos.
Yeah. Titans.
I'll take the Titans. Cowboys, Rams.
Cowboys.
I'll take the Rams. Last one. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. New England, Miami.
New England.
Miami.
Oh.
Bill Belichick revenge tour. Whatever. Brian Flores revenge tour. All right. That's everything we have for this week. That was our 10 questions. Thanks, everybody, for playing along. For Evan Bland, I'm Sam McKewon. This is the Pick Six Podcast. And next week, maybe, just maybe, we'll finally have a vote on Big Ten football to discuss. Thanks, everybody.